My daughter gifted her mill, a new house while I lived in a crumbling apartment with leaks. So I. My name is Eula, 63 years old, and until recently I was living in a crumbling apartment in Portland while working through my retirement years as a former nurse. I never expected my daughter Grace to buy a beautiful home for her mother-in-law Sylvia, while I was dealing with water damage and leaking pipes in my bathroom ceiling. The betrayal cut deep, leaving me wondering where I went wrong as a mother after all those years of sacrifice. If you're watching this and have ever felt forgotten by your own children, let me know where you're from and subscribe to hear how I turned this painful situation around. I became a single mother when Grace was just 8 years old. My husband Thomas died after a brutal battle with cancer that drained our savings and left me with mountains of medical debt. I remember the night I had to tell Grace that her daddy wasn't coming home from the hospital. Her little face crumpled, and I promised her right then that I would always make sure she had everything she needed. That promise shaped the next 30 years of my life. I worked as a registered nurse at Providence Portland Medical Center, often picking up double shifts in the emergency department when money got tight. Those years are a blur of navy blue scrubs, hospital corridor fluorescent lights, and the constant struggle to keep our heads above water financially. There were no vacations for us, while other families went to Disneyland or beach resorts. Grace and I would have staycations, where we'd visit the local library, make homemade pizzas, and watch movies from the second-hand VCR I bought at a yard sale. When Grace needed a computer for high school, I sold my mother's antique silver tea set that had been in our family for generations. When she needed braces, I picked up weekend shifts and sold my wedding ring. Despite the financial struggles, Grace was a brilliant student. She had her father's quick mind and my determination. I still have every single report card she brought home, most of them displaying rows of straight A's. Her teachers always told me she had potential, and I was determined not to let our circumstances hold her back. When she got accepted to the University of Oregon with a partial scholarship, I took out a second mortgage on our small house to cover the remaining tuition. I never told her about the additional loan. I wanted her to focus on her studies without worrying about money the way I constantly did. During those years, Grace and I had a close relationship. Every Sunday when she was home from college, we'd have brunch together at a little cafe near our house. The owner knew us by name and would always give us extra blueberries in our pancakes. During Christmas, we had a tradition of baking sugar cookies using my grandmother's recipe and decorating them while watching holiday movies. Those simple moments were the highlights of my life. It was during her junior year that Grace met Ryan. He was studying business administration and came from a wealthy family in Seattle. They had a whirlwind romance, and I watched my independent daughter fall head over heels for this tall, confident young man. While I was happy she had found love, something about Ryan made me feel instantly insecure. It wasn't anything he said or did specifically, but the casual way he talked about his family vacations to Europe, or the new car his parents bought him for graduation, made me acutely aware of the different worlds we came from. After Grace and Ryan got married in a ceremony that his parents largely paid for, I noticed subtle changes in my daughter. Our Sunday brunches became monthly, then quarterly, then special occasions only. She'd cancel plans at the last minute, always with a reasonable excuse about work or other commitments. The warmth between us didn't disappear, but a distance grew that I didn't know how to bridge. When I turned 60, my body decided it had enough of the physical demands of nursing. My back gave out during a 12-hour shift while helping move a patient. After 3 decades of caring for others, I was forced to retire earlier than planned with a pension that barely covered basic necessities. I had to sell our small house and move into an apartment in a less desirable part of town. The West Side garden apartments were anything but garden-like. My one-bedroom unit on the 3rd floor had water stains on the ceiling that spread like disease with every rainfall. The bathroom had a persistent mold problem that no amount of bleach could fully eliminate. The heating worked sporadically, leaving me to sleep in layers of clothing during Portland's damp winter months. The landlord, Mr. Finley, was a man who considered maintenance an optional part of his job. When I reported the leaking bathroom pipes, he promised to get to it, but rarely did. Other tenants told me they'd been waiting months for repairs. Most were like me, elderly on fixed incomes with few other options. I never told Grace about these conditions. She was building her own life with Ryan, who had started a successful real estate development company. They seemed busy and happy, and I didn't want to burden her with my problems. In my generation, parents didn't lean on their children. It was supposed to be the other way around. So I kept my struggles to myself, wiping away mold positioning buckets under leaks and wrapping myself in blankets when the heat failed. Looking back, I realize my silence was the beginning of the problem. But sometimes the habits of a lifetime are the hardest ones to break. The invitation arrived in my mailbox on a Tuesday afternoon. It was cream-colored cardstock with elegant gold lettering announcing a housewarming party for Sylvia Matthews. I recognized the name immediately, Ryan's mother. My first thought was confusion. Why would I be invited to Ryan's mother's housewarming? We'd met at the wedding and a few family gatherings, but we weren't close. Then I noticed Grace's handwriting on a small note attached. "Mom, please come. Big surprise. Love you." I assumed Grace and Ryan must have helped Sylvia find a new place, and for some reason Grace wanted me there. Perhaps this was a chance to become closer with Ryan's family. I felt a flutter of excitement at being included. Despite my limited budget, I wanted to bring something nice. I spent an entire day baking my special lemon cookies that Grace always loved as a child. I wrapped them in a pretty box I'd saved from Christmas and bought a small potted plant from the grocery store. It wasn't much, but I was proud of my offering. Getting to the address on the invitation required taking 3 different buses. The final stop left me in an upscale neighborhood in the West Hills, where the homes were set back from the street behind manicured lawns and tasteful landscaping. As I walked the last quarter-mile uphill, my arthritis flared up, making each step painful. The small package of cookies felt heavier with every house I passed. When I finally reached the address, I stood in awe before a stunning 2-story craftsman home with a wraparound porch. Flower baskets hung from the eaves, and a stone pathway led through a front garden bursting with color. The house looked like it belonged in a magazine. A banner across the front door read, "Welcome home. Sylvia." I rang the doorbell, suddenly feeling underdressed in my best blouse and slacks that I'd ironed carefully that morning. Sylvia herself opened the door, looking elegant in a silk blouse and pearls. "Eula, you made it," she said, air-kissing near my cheek. Come in, come in. Everyone's in the back garden." The interior of the home was even more impressive. Hardwood floors gleamed under recessed lighting. The open-concept living space featured a stone fireplace and windows that stretched from floor to ceiling, offering views of the mountains in the distance. The kitchen had marble countertops and stainless steel appliances that looked like they'd never been used. I followed Sylvia through the house to a back deck, where about 20 people were gathered sipping champagne and admiring the view. I spotted Grace across the yard, deep in conversation with a woman I didn't recognize. She waved when she saw me, but continued her discussion. Ryan approached with 2 glasses of champagne, handing one to me. "Glad you could make it, Eula. What do you think of the place?" "It's beautiful," I said truthfully. "Sylvia must be thrilled." Ryan beamed with pride. "Grace and I wanted to make sure Mum had somewhere special for her retirement. Her old place was just too cramped at 2,000 square feet, and those stairs were getting hard on her knees." Before I could process what he was saying, Sylvia clinked a spoon against her glass, calling for everyone's attention. The crowd quieted as she stepped onto a small platform that had been set up on the lawn. "I want to thank everyone for coming today to celebrate this new chapter in my life," she began, her voice carrying across the garden. "But most importantly, I want to thank my wonderful son Ryan and his wife Grace for this incredible gift. When they told me they were buying me a house, I never imagined something this perfect." The crowd applauded while I stood frozen, the champagne flute nearly slipping from my fingers. Grace and Ryan had bought this house, this beautiful, spacious, perfect house, for Sylvia. Meanwhile, just that morning, I'd placed a plastic container under my bathroom sink to catch the steadily dripping water. The room began to spin slightly. I felt hot, then cold. I excused myself, mumbling something about needing the restroom, and retreated into the house. I found a powder room off the main hall and locked the door behind me, sinking onto the closed toilet lid. Through the door, I could hear guests exclaiming over the generosity of Grace and Ryan. Someone mentioned the house must have cost at least 7 figures. Another voice commented on how lucky Sylvia was to have such thoughtful children. I splashed cold water on my face, trying to regain my composure. As I exited the bathroom, I nearly bumped into Grace in the hallway. "Mum, there you are. Are you okay? You look pale," she said, concern crossing her features. "I'm fine, sweetie." I lied. "Just a little tired from the bus ride. It's a beautiful house. Sylvia must be very happy. She is Ryan, and I have been planning this for months. We wanted it to be perfect." Grace's face glowed with pride. "You two are very generous," I managed to say, forcing a smile that felt like it might crack my face. "We feel so blessed to be able to do this," Grace replied. "Ryan always said he wanted to make sure his mum was taken care of in her retirement." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak further. The words, "in her retirement," echoed in my mind. I was in my retirement too, but my daughter had never seen my apartment, never asked about my living conditions. "I think I should head home," I said. "I'm not feeling well suddenly. Might be coming down with something." "But you just got here," Grace protested. "At least stay for the cake and the tour of the upstairs." "Another time," I promised, already moving toward the front door. "Give my best to Ryan and Sylvia." I left quickly before Grace could see the tears that threatened to spill over. The bus ride home was a blur. I sat clutching my unused housewarming gift, a potted plant and homemade cookies, that suddenly seemed pathetic compared to $1 million house. The entire time, one thought kept circling in my mind. My daughter bought a house for her mother-in-law while I lived with leaking pipes and mold. What had I done wrong? The rain started halfway through my bus journey home, as if the Portland sky had decided to match my mood. By the time I reached my apartment building, water was streaming from the heavens, soaking through my light jacket. I trudged up the 3 flights of stairs, my knees protesting with each step. When I opened my apartment door, I was greeted by the sound of dripping water. During the few hours I'd been gone, a new leak had developed in the kitchen ceiling right above the small table where I ate my solitary meals. A steady plink, plink, plink punctuated the silence as drops fell into a growing puddle on my linoleum floor. I stood in the doorway, still holding my untouched housewarming gift, and the contrast between Sylvia's perfect new home and my deteriorating apartment hit me with full force. There in my kitchen was the physical manifestation of how invisible I had become to my own daughter. I put down the cookies, and Plant found an old cooking pot and placed it under the leak. Then I changed out of my wet clothes into a nightgown and robe, moving through these actions like a sleepwalker. When I finally sat on the edge of my bed, the emotions I'd been holding back all day crashed over me like a tidal wave. That night was one of the longest of my life. Sleep evaded me completely as questions and memories tumbled through my mind. I remembered the Christmas Eve when Grace was 11 and desperately wanted a specific doll that was sold out everywhere. I'd picked up an extra shift at the hospital, working through the holiday night while a neighbor watched Grace. With my overtime pay, I managed to buy the doll from a reseller at twice the retail price. The joy on her face Christmas morning had made the exhaustion worthwhile. I recalled selling my mother's pearl earrings, the last piece of family jewelry I owned, to help pay for Grace's college textbooks her freshman year. I never told her where the money came from. I'd always believed that protecting her from our financial reality was part of my job as a mother. Around 3 in the morning, my phone lit up with a text from Grace. "Did you get home safely? Sorry you weren't feeling well. We missed you at the party." I stared at the message, my thumbs hovering over the keyboard. What could I say? That I was heartbroken, that I felt betrayed. Instead, I typed, "Home safe, just tired. The house is lovely." In the days that followed, I avoided Grace's calls and texts, making excuses about being busy or not feeling well. The hurt was too raw, and I feared what might come pouring out if I spoke to her. Each time the phone rang with her name on the display, I felt my heart constrict with a mixture of longing and resentment. After a week of my avoidance, I finally confided in my friend Judith, a former colleague from the hospital. We met at a small coffee shop midway between our homes, and the story spilled out of me between sips of too hot coffee and silent tears. "Oh, Eula," Judith sighed when I finished. "That's a hard pill to swallow." "Am I overreacting?" I asked, genuinely uncertain. "Should I just be happy that Grace and Ryan are doing well enough to be so generous?" Judith considered this, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. "I don't think you're overreacting, but I do think there might be more going on here than you realize. From what you've told me about Ryan and his family, they have different values about money and status. Is it possible Grace has been influenced by them, that she's caught between two worlds?" I hadn't considered this perspective. In my pain, I'd been seeing Grace's actions as a direct rejection of me, rather than the result of competing influences and expectations. "Maybe," I conceded. "But she knows how I've struggled financially. How could she not see the disconnect in buying a luxury home for her mother-in-law while I'm living like this?" "Does she know, though?" Judith asked gently. "You said yourself you've never shown her your apartment, or told her about the leaks and mold. You've always been so determined to handle everything yourself." Her words hit a nerve. Had my lifelong habit of self-reliance, of protecting Grace from my problems, created this blind spot in my daughter's perception of my life? My reflections were interrupted that night by a catastrophe in my bathroom. A pipe behind the wall burst, sending water cascading down the wall and across the floor. I spent hours sopping up water with every towel I owned and calling the emergency maintenance number, which went straight to voicemail. When Mr. Finley finally returned my call the next morning, his response was infuriatingly casual. "I'll try to get someone out there next week," he said, as if a flooded bathroom was a minor inconvenience. "Next week I have water damage and possibly mold developing now," I protested. "Lady, I've got 20 units and 3 maintenance guys. You're on the list," he replied before hanging up. That night I found myself looking through old photo albums. There was Grace on her first day of kindergarten, her hair in uneven pigtails that I'd tried my best to style. Grace at her high school graduation, her face serious but eyes shining with possibility. Grace on her wedding day, looking like a princess in a dress I could never have afforded to give her. As I traced my finger over her smiling face in the photos, my hurt began to crystallize into something else. A determination that something needed to change. I'd spent my entire life putting Grace first, solving problems on my own, and never asking for help. But where had that left me? Invisible and forgotten in a crumbling apartment while my daughter bought luxury homes for someone else's mother. It was time for a different approach. The knock on my apartment door came early Saturday morning, startling me from my first cup of coffee. When I opened it, Grace stood there looking worried and slightly frazzled, a far cry from her polished appearance at Sylvia's housewarming party. "Mum," she breathed, pulling me into a tight hug. "Why aren't you answering my calls? I've been so worried." I stepped back to let her in, suddenly self-conscious about the state of my apartment. This was the first time Grace had visited since I moved in 3 years ago. I'd always made excuses to meet her elsewhere, or visit her home instead. "I've been busy," I said vaguely, watching as her eyes took in the water stains on the ceiling, the bucket in the kitchen catching drops, and the musty smell that no amount of air freshener could disguise. "Mom," she said slowly, her eyes widening as she fully registered her surroundings. "What's going on here? Are those water leaks? And is that mold in the corner?" The concern in her voice sparked something in me, a mixture of relief that she cared and anger that she was only noticing now. "Yes, Grace, I have water leaks and mold and a landlord who doesn't care. I've been living like this for almost 2 years now." I said, my voice steadier than I expected. Grace looked stunned. "Why didn't you tell me? I had no idea it was this bad. When would I tell you during one of our brief phone calls? Or maybe I should have mentioned it at Sylvia's housewarming party for her new perfect house." I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. Grace's face fell as understanding dawned. "Is that what this is about? You're upset about Sylvia's house?" "Wouldn't you be?" I asked, finally letting my true feelings surface. "You bought your mother-in-law a beautiful home with mountain views and marble countertops, while I'm here catching water in buckets and breathing in mold. Do you have any idea how that made me feel? How invisible I felt?" "That's not fair, Mum," Grace said, her voice taking on a defensive edge. "That was Ryan's decision too. His parents helped us get started in our business. We owed them. And you owe me nothing, is that it?" The words came out sharper than I intended. "That's not what I meant." Grace's voice rose to match mine. "But you never said anything about needing help. You never once complained about this place or asked for anything." "Should a mother have to ask?" I shot back. "How was I supposed to know if you didn't tell me?" Grace was nearly shouting now. "You've always been the strong one, Mum. The one who handles everything, who never needs help. You never let me see this side of your life." Her words hit me like a physical blow because there was truth in them. I had spent decades cultivating an image of self-sufficiency, hiding my struggles and solving problems on my own. "Ryan's family is different," Grace continued, her voice softening slightly. "They talk about money openly. They ask for what they want. Sylvia has been dropping hints about wanting to move closer to us for years. She specifically asked Ryan to help her find a new place when she decided to sell her old house. And I didn't ask, so I don't get considered at all," I said, trying to understand. Grace ran her hands through her hair in frustration. "It wasn't like that. Ryan's parents have expectations. His dad is always talking about taking care of family. There's pressure." "I'm your family too, Grace." The simple statement hung in the air between us. "I know that, Mum." Grace's voice cracked. "But you've never let me take care of you. Ever. Not once in my entire life." We stood in silence for a moment, the only sound the steady drip of water into the kitchen pot. "Did you sell Grandma's jewelry to help me through college?" Grace asked suddenly. I was startled by the question. "How did you know about that? Aunt Susan mentioned it years ago. She thought I knew." Grace's eyes filled with tears. "What else did you sell, Mum? What else did you give up that I don't know about?" The dam broke then, and I told her everything. The second mortgage, selling my wedding ring for her braces, working double shifts to pay for school trips and prom dresses. all the sacrifices I'd hidden thinking I was protecting her. As I spoke, another leak suddenly developed in the corner of the living room, water beginning to seep through a crack in the ceiling. Grace watched in horror as I calmly got another container to catch the drops, a routine I'd performed countless times. "Mum," she whispered, "I had no idea. All these years I thought you were okay. You always seemed okay." "I wanted you to think that," I admitted. "I wanted you to focus on your life, not worry about mine." "But that's not how family is supposed to work," Grace said, tears now streaming down her face. "We're supposed to take care of each other." In the painful silence that followed, I could see the gulf that had grown between us, built not just of different circumstances, but of unspoken truths and assumptions. And for the first time, I could see my own role in creating that distance. After our emotional confrontation, Grace insisted on taking me to lunch at a small cafe near my apartment. Over soup and sandwiches, she told me more about Ryan's family and the complex dynamics at play. "Sylvia has always been difficult," Grace admitted, stirring her soup absently. "She has a way of making her wants sound like needs, and she's a master of the guilt trip." I listened as Grace described her mother-in-law's manipulative patterns, the casual mentions of friends whose children bought them vacation homes, the sighs over how lonely her old neighborhood was becoming, the comments about wanting to be closer to her future grandchildren. "Ryan adores his mother," Grace continued. "He can't see through her manipulation the way I can. And his father Howard is big on family obligation. He's always talking about how a man's first duty is to take care of his parents." "And where do I fit into this equation?" I asked quietly. Grace looked down at her plate. "That's the problem, Mum. I've been caught in the middle. Ryan's family is loud about their expectations. You've always been silent about yours. In their world, the squeaky wheel gets the grease." A week later, Grace invited me to dinner at their home, a spacious Tudor in an exclusive part of town. I accepted reluctantly, still processing my complicated feelings about our relationship. Their house was beautiful, but not ostentatious. Family photos lined the hallway, including several of me and Grace from her childhood. It was a small comfort to see my face among the family memories. While Grace finished preparing dinner, I overheard Ryan on the phone in his office, the door partially open. "Yes, Mum. We'll come see the house again tomorrow," he was saying. "No, I don't think the kitchen backsplash needs to be replaced." "Well, if you really think it doesn't match the countertops." Okay, I'll talk to the contractor." When he emerged, he greeted me warmly enough, but I could sense the distraction in his manner. Throughout dinner, he checked his phone repeatedly, eventually explaining that his mother was texting about changes she wanted to make to her new home. "Sylvia's very particular about her living space," he said with an indulgent smile. "Always has been." "The contractors have already been back 3 times," Grace added a note of tension in her voice. "Each time for something different." Ryan shrugged. "It's her house. She should have it exactly as she wants it." "It's also your money," Grace pointed out gently. "Our money," Ryan corrected. "And what's the point of success if we can't make our family comfortable?" He turned to me. "Grace tells me your apartment has some maintenance issues." The casual way he mentioned my living conditions, as if a crumbling ceiling and toxic mold were minor inconveniences, made me realize how disconnected he was from my reality. "Yes," I said simply. "The building has seen better days." "You should call the landlord," he suggested, as if this obvious solution had never occurred to me. "Ryan," Grace interjected, "Mum's been dealing with an absentee landlord. It's more complicated than that." "Well, then she should move," he said, with the easy confidence of someone who has never had to count pennies or choose between medicine and food. Moving takes money, Ryan. Grace reminded him, a slight edge to her voice. Right, of course, he said, looking uncomfortable. Then brightening. Hey, we're thinking about taking my parents to Hawaii this winter. Mum's always wanted to stay at the Four Seasons on Maui. You should come too, Eula. The invitation was clearly well-intentioned, but it showed how little he understood my financial situation. The cost of such a trip would be several months of my pension. That's very kind, I replied diplomatically, but I don't think that would work for me. Later, while helping Grace with the dishes, I noticed how tired she looked. The confident, polished woman from Sylvia's party was gone, replaced by someone who seemed stretched too thin. Are you okay, sweetheart? I asked gently. She sighed, her shoulders slumping. I'm trying to keep everyone happy, Mum. Ryan wants me to spend more time with his family. Sylvia calls daily about the house. My job is demanding more hours. And now I'm worried sick about you in that apartment. She wiped a tear with the back of her hand. I feel like I'm failing everyone. In that moment, seeing my daughter's distress, I realized something important. Grace wasn't just an affluent woman who had forgotten her roots. She was caught in a web of competing loyalties and expectations, trying desperately to please everyone. And for the first time, I saw clearly that my silence about my own needs hadn't been a gift to Grace. It had been another burden, leaving her to guess what I might need while juggling the vocal demands of Ryan's family. As I hugged my exhausted daughter in her expensive kitchen, I understood that part of loving her meant being honest about my situation. Not to add to her burdens, but to allow her the dignity of making informed choices about how to balance her responsibilities. And I also knew that regardless of what Grace might do to help me, I needed to start helping myself. The following week, I made a decision. For too long, I'd been passive about my situation, silently enduring conditions that were not just inconvenient, but potentially dangerous to my health. It was time to take action with or without Grace's help. My first step was to research my rights as a tenant. The local library offered free internet access, and I spent several afternoons reading about Oregon's rental laws. I learned that landlords were legally required to maintain properties in a habitable condition, which my apartment with its leaks and mold certainly was not. Next, I visited the local legal aid office, where a kind paralegal named Jennifer reviewed my situation. Mr. Finley is violating several housing codes, she confirmed after seeing the photos I'd taken of my apartment. You have grounds for a formal complaint. Jennifer helped me draft a letter to Mr. Finley detailing all the maintenance issues and citing the specific laws he was breaking. I delivered it in person, taking satisfaction in his surprised expression when I handed him the document rather than just making another verbal request. This is a legal notice, I explained calmly. I've documented all outstanding maintenance issues and am requesting repairs within the 14 days required by Oregon law. If the repairs aren't completed, I'll be filing a complaint with the housing authority. His dismissive attitude changed quickly. Now, Mrs. Winters, there's no need to get lawyers involved. I've been meaning to address those issues. You've had 3 years of meaning to, I replied. Now you have 14 days of required to. That same week, I joined a tenant advocacy group called Portland Housing Justice. At my first meeting, I met dozens of seniors in situations similar to mine or worse. Listening to their stories, I realized I wasn't alone in my struggles. Margaret, a 70-year-old former teacher, had been fighting her landlord for months over a broken heating system. James, in his late 60s, was facing eviction because his building was being converted to luxury condos. Their courage in advocating for themselves inspired me. Through the group, I connected with a community housing counselor who helped me apply for affordable senior housing options. The waiting lists can be long, she warned me, but your current living conditions might qualify you for priority placement. I also began working part-time at a small medical clinic near my apartment, taking vital signs and handling patient intake. The work was less physically demanding than hospital nursing, and the extra income allowed me to start a small savings account. With the guidance of the advocacy group, I documented every interaction with Mr. Finley and every new problem that arose in my apartment. I took dated photographs, kept copies of all written communications, and made recordings of our conversations, with Oregon being a one-party consent state for recordings. When Mr. Finley sent a maintenance worker who merely patched the leaking ceiling rather than addressing the underlying plumbing issue, I documented the inadequate repair. When the patch began leaking again 3 days later, I took more photos and sent another formal notice. Mr. Finley's next tactic was intimidation. He began dropping by my apartment unannounced, claiming he needed to inspect various things. Each time, I calmly informed him that Oregon law required 24 hours written notice before entering a tenant's unit, and I would not be allowing him in without proper notification. After one such attempt, he grew frustrated. "You know, Mrs. Winters, I have a waiting list of people who want apartments in this building. People who don't cause problems." I met his gaze steadily. "Are you threatening me with eviction, Mr. Finley? Because retaliation against a tenant for requesting legally required maintenance is also against the law. I'd be happy to add that to my complaint file." He left without another word, and the next day a proper plumbing crew arrived to fix the leaking pipes. Throughout this time, I kept Grace informed about what I was doing, but made it clear that I wasn't asking for her financial intervention. Our weekly phone calls became more honest with me, sharing both my challenges and my small victories. "Mum, I'm really proud of you," she said after I told her about confronting Mr. Finley. "But I still feel terrible that you're dealing with this alone." "I'm not alone anymore," I told her. "I have the tenant group. I have my new colleagues at the clinic, and I have you. Just knowing you understand what I'm going through means a lot." 3 months into my self-advocacy journey, I received a call from the senior housing coordinator. An apartment had become available in a clean, well-maintained building specifically for seniors on fixed incomes. The rent was calculated as a percentage of my income, making it affordable on my pension and part-time work. When I visited the apartment, I nearly cried at the sight of the solid roof, the clean walls free of water stains, and the properly functioning bathroom. The building had a community room where residents gathered for weekly activities, and a small garden where tenants could grow vegetables and flowers. As I signed the lease, I felt a bittersweet mixture of emotions. Pride in having solved my housing problem largely through my own efforts. Sadness that it had taken a rift with Grace to push me towards self-advocacy. And a quiet determination that my relationship with my daughter would be different moving forward, based on mutual honesty rather than silent sacrifice. I invited Grace to meet me for coffee at a small shop, midway between our homes. I arrived early, securing a quiet corner table where we could talk privately. When Grace entered, I was struck by how much lighter she looked, as if some of the tension she'd been carrying had eased. "I have news," I said after we'd settled with our drinks. "Me too," she replied with a small smile. "But you go first." "I'm moving," I announced. "I've been approved for a senior apartment in Laurelhurst. It's clean, well-maintained, and affordable." Grace's eyes widened. "Mum, that's wonderful. How did this happen?" I told her about my research, the tenant advocacy group, and the housing counsellor who had helped me navigate the application process. "The apartment is small, but perfect for me," I explained. "And the building has security, an elevator, and even a community garden." "When do you move in?" Grace asked, leaning forward eagerly. "Next month. The current tenant is moving out on the 15th. Grace reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'm so proud of you, Mum, and I want to help with the move. Ryan and I both will." "I'd appreciate that," I said, feeling a warmth that had been missing between us for too long. But Grace, I want you to know something important. I didn't do this to make you feel bad about not solving my housing problem. I did it because I realized I needed to speak up for myself instead of suffering in silence. Grace nodded slowly. I've been thinking about that a lot, about how you always protected me from difficulties, always put my needs first. I think, I think I learned the wrong lesson from that. What do you mean? I asked. I learned that love means hiding your struggles from the people you care about, that asking for help is somehow a failure. Grace's eyes grew damp. But that's not right, is it? Real love should include honesty about what we need. I felt my own eyes filling with tears. No, it's not right. And that was my mistake. I thought I was being strong for you, but I was actually creating a wall between us. We talked for nearly 2 hours that afternoon, more openly than we had in years. Grace shared her struggles with balancing her loyalty to me with the expectations of Ryan's family. I told her about my fears of becoming a burden as I aged. We acknowledged the miscommunications and assumptions that had led us to this point. I've talked to Ryan, Grace said as our conversation wound down. Really talked to him about the differences between your situation and his mother's. He didn't understand at first. He's never experienced financial insecurity, but he's beginning to get it. That's all anyone can ask, I said. Just to be understood. Moving day arrived on a crisp fall morning. Grace and Ryan showed up with coffee and donuts, followed by a small moving truck they had rented. My possessions were few enough that the move took only one trip. As Ryan carried boxes into my new apartment, I noticed his expression change when he saw the condition of my old furniture and belongings. When he helped me pack up my bathroom with its peeling linoleum and stained fixtures, a look of genuine shock crossed his face. Eula, he said quietly. I had no idea it was like this. Few people do, I replied. Poverty isn't always visible from the outside. That evening, after everything had been moved and Grace and Ryan had gone home, I sat in my new living room, marveling at the solid ceiling above me and the properly sealed windows that kept out the evening chill. For the first time in years, I didn't need to position buckets to catch leaking water or worry about breathing in mold spores. Over the following months, Grace and I worked to rebuild our relationship on a more honest foundation. We established a weekly Sunday brunch tradition, alternating between a cafe near my new apartment and her home. Sometimes Ryan joined us, sometimes not, but he had become notably more understanding of my circumstances. I made new friends in my senior community, joining a book club and volunteering to help maintain the building's garden. My part-time work at the clinic gave me purpose and supplemented my income enough that I could occasionally treat Grace to lunch. A small thing, but important to my sense of dignity. The most surprising development came that Christmas, when Grace suggested hosting the holiday dinner at my apartment rather than her home. It's smaller, but it's cozy, she said, and I thought it might be nice to start some new traditions. To my astonishment, Ryan agreed and even suggested inviting his parents. It's time they got to know you better, he said, as family. Sylvia's initial discomfort at my modest apartment was evident in her tight smile and the way she perched on the edge of my sofa as if afraid to fully settle in. But as the evening progressed and wine was poured, conversation flowed and her posture gradually relaxed. At one point, she commented on a handmade quilt displayed on my wall, one I'd made years ago when Grace was in high school. That's beautiful workmanship, she said, examining the stitching. Did you make this? When I nodded, she seemed genuinely impressed. I've never had the patience for handcrafts. You must have remarkable focus. It was a small moment of connection, but a real one. Perhaps the beginning of a relationship based on something other than our connection to Grace and Ryan. As I reflect on the journey that brought me here, I realize how much I've learned about myself and about love. For decades, I believed that protecting my child from my struggles was the ultimate expression of motherly love. I thought silent sacrifice was strength. I've come to understand that true strength sometimes means voicing your needs, that allowing others to see your vulnerability isn't weakness but honesty, and that relationships thrive on mutual care, not one-sided sacrifice. The most valuable lesson came late in life but wasn't too late. The same voice I found to advocate for decent housing was the voice I needed to build authentic connections with the people I love. Sometimes feeling invisible can lead to finding your voice in unexpected ways. For those of you watching who have found yourself in similar situations, feeling unseen by family members or struggling to speak up about your needs, I hope my story encourages you. It's never too late to advocate for yourself, to build a support network, and to create new patterns in your relationships. Have you ever had to find your voice after years of silence, or rebuilt a relationship that was damaged by miscommunication? Please share your experiences in the comments below. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to make a change in their own life. If you found value in my journey, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. I'll be sharing more stories of late life transformations and the wisdom that comes from unexpected challenges. Thank you for being part of this community, and remember, your voice matters no matter your age or circumstance.